Stop buying bad GPUs! Hi, welcome back to PC Builder. I'm Jason. Finally, it's time to talk about the best GPU for gaming, 2022 edition. The GPU market and GPU prices were totally crazy for a year and a half. The best GPU in 2021? It was whatever you could get your hands on that didn't require handing over your entire life savings. But now that GPU prices are going down to MSRP, with some even selling for below MSRP, I see too many people buying bad GPUs. We'll cover how to get the best graphics card for gaming in 2022, including comparing AMD versus NVIDIA GPUs, GPUs from previous generations, and looking at the best GPU for 1080p gaming, 1440p gaming, and 4K gaming right now. Maybe even more important, we're going to tell you which GPUs to absolutely avoid. We'll even discuss the upcoming new GPU releases and whether that should impact whether or not to buy now or wait for a new GPU. If you get value out of the video, please give it a like as it really helps out the channel. And remember to subscribe and click that bell icon. That way you get notified when we release cool content. And we just got approved for super thanks. Check out that button right below. With that, let's jump into it. So what are the GPUs, both used and new, that you should be considering right now? Well, on the retail market, new, NVIDIA's most relevant GPUs are the RTX 3000 series, the last generation RTX 2060, and GTX 1660, including the Super and TI GTX 1660 versions. AMD's most relevant new cards are all the RX 6000 series. You can consider buying any of the new cards on the used market, as we do expect a flood of them to come sometime in the fall of 2022 when cryptocurrency mining largely abandons GPU mining and miners sell off a huge amount of GPUs. So check out our most recent monthly GPU update for more information about that. The most relevant older used GPUs are primarily focused on 1080p budget gaming. On the used side for NVIDIA, we have the GTX 1650 Super, the GTX 1070 and 1080, and the GTX 900 series, though the 900 series are getting quite old. On the AMD side, the used market is primarily limited right now to just the RX 570 and 580 4GB models, as most of AMD's 5000 series cards were just too good at GPU mining, and they've still got crazy prices, though that will likely change when GPU mining effectively ends and miners dump huge amounts of these GPUs. There are other cards that could be mentioned, but given where prices are, that pretty much sums up the used market. If you're wondering about the Intel Arc GPUs, so is everybody else at the time of this video. Originally scheduled to launch sometime in 2021, they've just continuously been pushed back and pushed back and pushed back, with a current date of summer 2022 currently on the books. We'll see if they come out, and if they do, we'll do an update to this. But in the meantime, AMD and NVIDIA are your choices. Now, before we go any further, I also want to list out some of the GPUs you should absolutely avoid, especially at their current pricing, which might seem more reasonable than some of the cards I just listed, but it's horrible when you consider how low performance they are. The first GPU to avoid is the regular GTX 1650. Now, that's not to be confused with the GTX 1650 Super that you can often find used. Despite the name similarity, these are actually two very different GPUs. And the hard fact is that in 2022, the GTX 1650 just isn't worth your money, especially at its current new price of around $230 US. Yes, it's a cheaper card that you can buy brand new for around 200 bucks, but in 2022, its performance is just too low to consider. Similarly, the GTX 1050 Ti, it just isn't worth it at almost any price. And don't even look at the GT 1030, GT 710, or GT 730, as these are just pure trash. On the AMD side, I'd primarily avoid the RX 6500 XT, as AMD really kneecapped that GPU with only PCIe 4.0 by 4 bandwidth instead of by 16. While it runs okayish on a PCIe Gen 4 system, it certainly isn't an upgrade for anyone using a PCIe Gen 3 system, which is probably going to be a lot of you. And the 6500 XT lacks media encoding, so forget recording gameplay or streaming on it. I would also avoid the RX 550 and RX 560 because, similar to the GTX 1650, the performance is just too low, unless they fall well under $100. So how do we compare AMD versus NVIDIA graphics card? The most obvious performance metric is, of course, frames per second, or FPS. It's just a measure of how much the GPU can output, and the higher the number, the better. But it is worth noting that some game engines just do better with either AMD or NVIDIA graphics cards. For instance, AMD GPUs do better on games like Call of Duty Warzone than NVIDIA GPUs do, while titles like Fortnite seem to do better on NVIDIA GPUs. So to compare, you should either focus on the games that you play or look for benchmarks which include a wider range of games. At 1080p, AMD GPUs tend to dominate in price and performance, but at least in the current generation, as we go up in resolution, NVIDIA GPUs pull about even at 1440p and slightly ahead at 4K for GPUs that are capable at this resolution, which is primarily the ultra high end. Then of course we have all the extra features, starting with gaming features. There's upscaling technologies like NVIDIA's DLSS and AMD's FSR, which will boost FPS in supported games, and AMD's newest upscaler called RSR, which works in every game regardless of developer support. While NVIDIA has a very slight edge in image quality, I find that AMD's upscaling, it looks pretty good. And it's available in every game rather than just developer supported ones. That's a big advantage at the lower and mid-tier GPUs where they might otherwise struggle to play a GPU-intensive title at good frame rates. That being said, DLSS is supported in a pretty wide suite of games itself. Of course, there's ray tracing, which gives images a more lifelike effect of light and reflection modeling. Now, NVIDIA generally has the edge here, and on some games, it's quite a large edge. Though personally, I would say that the significantly lower FPS that you get when turning ray tracing on, it just isn't worth it for me personally, even on an NVIDIA GPU. Also, even NVIDIA GPUs struggle somewhat with ray tracing until you hit the mid-tier and higher end models. If you feel differently, then of course take this into account. Though I will say that if you're serious about ray tracing, the next generation of GPUs coming towards the end of 2022 are expected to be another huge leap forward. So if that's important to you, consider waiting. There are other differences, of course, but in gaming, they're relatively minor. Where NVIDIA's NVENC media encoder once held a commanding lead over AMD's VCE encoder, the gap is considerably narrowed, and there's essentially no visible difference in recording gameplay or streaming to Twitch or a similar service. If you do a lot of video editing in addition to gaming, then NVIDIA still does have better third-party support in programs like Adobe Premiere Pro, which does equal better performance. But the latest reports are that AMD is working to close this gap as well, and if you don't do a heavy volume of editing, then I wouldn't really worry about it. The last feature is actually on your monitor, or the monitor you want to buy, and that's variable refresh rate technologies, specifically NVIDIA G-Sync versus AMD Freesync. This syncs the FPS of your graphics card and the monitor to avoid screen tearing. While some monitors have more premium versions of these technologies, which do have additional benefits beyond just variable refresh rate. The good news is that most monitors you can buy today are compatible with both AMD Freesync and NVIDIA G-Sync, as long as you use the DisplayPort cable. Those lucky enough to have a new HDMI 2.1 monitor can use the HDMI 2.1 cable instead. For more on this, check out our Best Gaming Monitor 2022 video. But once you settle on a specific model of GPU, like say a 3060 Ti, how do you know which specific 3060 Ti to get? Are there differences between the ASUS Strix RTX 3060 Ti and the more budget Gigabyte Eagle model? Well, there actually are. AMD and NVIDIA each specify the base specs for every GPU, and that includes the thermal design power, or TDP, which is the wattage of the card. The other thing that's specified is the base and boost frequencies. But the add-in board partners, or AIB for short, like Gigabyte, MSI, and ASUS, they can create models that increase the TDP and/or apply a factory overclock to the GPU, as well as designing the cooler itself. For instance, the MSI Mech Radeon RX 6700 XT currently sells for $485, has a 2-fan cooler design, a boost clock of 2581 MHz, and a TDP of 230 watts. For $569, the Sapphire Nitro Plus RX 6700 XT has a 3-fan cooler design, a slight overclock to 2622 MHz, and about 10% more power at 260 watts. But is it worth the extra $85? Generally, even the most souped up version of the lower end and mid-range GPUs perform within about 10% of the base models. And buying the cheapest next model up, so in this case an RX 6800, is usually going to give you better performance. So my advice is once you settle on a GPU model to buy, if a better version of it isn't much more, it can be worth it, as long as you don't overspend to the point where you could have jumped up a graphics card tier. At the high and ultra high end, differences can be more extreme, and you'll often find heavily overclocked and powered up versions of the same model GPU like the RTX 3080 Ti, RTX 3090, RX 6800 XT, and RX 6900 XT, including some water-cooled versions. Whether or not those are worth it to you, it's all up to your budget. So what's the best gaming GPU 2022? Let's compare FPS performance of AMD and NVIDIA GPUs, then we'll add in price to performance to get the best performance GPU at 1080p, 1440p, and 4K. Using the TechPowerUp GPU database, I've listed out the relative performance of all the graphics card we listed before versus the RX 570, which is a GPU that can play most games at 60 FPS at medium settings at 1080p, and it's the lowest end GPU that I would use at 1080p today. We'll use this as a rough metric to compare performance among the NVIDIA GPUs and then against AMD's best GPUs, as well as establish some boundary points for playing at 1440p and 4K. What do you need for 1080p gaming? Any of the cards I listed at the beginning of the video. We'll throw in the used cards in just a moment. Just want to keep this manageable right now. For 1440p, I really think the 3060 is kind of on the edge. I almost feel like it's a 1440p card, but it can't quite make all titles at good frame rates and high settings in 1440p. A lot of titles it'll play. Double check the titles you play, maybe it's good enough for you. Similarly, the RX 6600, just 5% lower performance, kind of in the same boat. So I would look at the RX 6600 XT with 237% performance over an RX 570, or a RTX 3060 Ti as my dividing line and above for 1440p. For 4K, I really think you need an RTX 3070 or RTX 3070 Ti, which I've combined here because the performance is very, very close, and just simplify the spreadsheet, or an RX 6800. You might be able to get away with a 6700 XT, but I think 6800 is the lowest I would look to go. Anything above that would be great. So we simply sorted by price to performance, and what do we get? Well, we see that the top values in terms of price per performance of just rasterization, Radeon RX 6600 XT and the Radeon RX 6600. The 6600 is selling for $350 at the time of the video. 6600 XT, not that much more expensive. Both are well below their MSRPs now, $10, $15 below their MSRPs, which is good. We should continue to see these cards fall as things progress. Again, check links in the description for current pricing. Those will be my go-tos at 1080p right now. If you absolutely can't afford that for some reason, then I would definitely look at a used option RX 580, RX 570. Those are going for about $150 to $200 at the time of filming. Check the spreadsheet for the latest pricing. On the NVIDIA side, if you want 1080p gaming, it's really tough. You know, you're basically faced with a couple of graphics cards. 2060 does not compete well against the 3060. The 3060's price came down today as I'm filming to $390, still way overpriced compared to their AMD competition, but much better than where it was at almost $110 more. The 3050 remains not the greatest value at $330. This GPU really needs to come down under 300. It needs to be well below the 6600 in order to be really competitive. Remember, it's just a 1660 Super with, DLSS basically. That's all the 3050 really is. At 1440p for NVIDIA, you're looking at the 3060 Ti, $570. A little tough on the price to performance. I would expect to see this card fall, but the 6700 XT right now, $480, got some massive price reductions. Actually, today I'm filming. I was about to really crush this thing, but it really came through with huge price reductions. Now selling for its MSRP of $480 at that price. Really great price to performance. And finally, for 4K, I think you're looking at a 3070 on the lower end, $700. 6800 has quite a bit more performance for not that much more, so I would look in that direction. But again, if you have to have NVIDIA right now, I might jump all the way up to a 3080. Now, I've lumped the 3080s together because the price and everything's all over the place. However, know that the 3080 12GB version does have more performance than the regular 3080, something to consider. Now, you'll note I don't have any of the 6950 XT, the new AMD 50 refreshes of the 6000 series. I will add them in, and the link to this spreadsheet is going to be down in the video description, so you can come in here and fill the prices in your region, both used and new, and you can get the best price performance card. Of course, the big question is, should you buy one of these GPUs, or should you wait for the next generation? That's the NVIDIA RTX 4000 series and the AMD RX 7000 series, which are due to begin launching by the end of 2022. And they promise significantly higher performance, possibly 80% or more of the current generation. It really depends on which end of the market you're in. If NVIDIA and AMD launch the next generation as they have previous generations, we'll first get the flagship GPUs, so in this case like the RTX 4080 and RTX 4070, along with the RX 7800 XT and RX 7800 first, rumored to be coming in late 2022. Those would be then closely followed by about a month or so by the Halo products, like the RTX 4090 and RX 7900 XT. Then we'll have a gap. The RTX 3060 Ti, it took another month and a half, then followed by a 2-month gap for the RTX 3060, and another year to get the RTX 3050. AMD didn't release the RX 6600 XT until 9 months after the RX 6800 XT, and the RX 6600 took yet another month after that. So unless AMD and NVIDIA change their launch strategies, which could always happen, it seems like we'll be waiting into 2023 for anything below the upper tiers of performance and price. And that is, of course, if you can even get one at launch, as it often takes a month after launch for stock to stabilize, even in a normal market. That being said, if you are a high-end buyer considering an RTX 3090 or RX 6900 XT or 6950 XT, I'd strongly consider saving my money and waiting. Now, links to all the GPUs are included down in the video description, so check out current pricing. And remember, if you got value of the video, please give it a like, subscribe, and click that bell icon. That way you get notified when we release cool content. Check out our monthly GPU market update videos right here. Whole playlist, the most recent ones on top. Check out where the GPU market is at right now, regardless of when this video was made, and we'll catch you on the next one.